these soil tests, and after the first year, Olsen P. The lady sitting in the back go, oh yeah. Look, and they think so too, so let's go.
Well, I'm just really, I've known Ewan right from the start when he started with Protas, and we were based in Hawke's Bay. And yeah, really, we got interested in it purely from a health perspective, really. And my wife had breast cancer about 15 years ago, and it was all part of the journey, looking to improve our health and just from a holistic point of view. And then I was a farmer and I became a stock agent. And one thing I noticed on my journey touring around Hawke's Bay, was that the soils and the stock numbers and everything were depleting. And quite seriously in some cases, and because I had been a farmer in the 70s and early 80s, and the change in the next 20 years was quite phenomenal, really. The soil didn't seem to have the guts or the recovery that it normally that it used to have, and you used to see, of course, the stock numbers were like in the 70s when SMPs and everything were on, people had sort of like 4 stock units, but a lot of people, just of recent days, if they were doing 2.5, that was probably the norm. Well, when we had SMPs, it was an encouragement to increase your stock numbers, and we and people did too. It was probably 4 to 4.5 per acre, I would say. Where in our particular case on our farm, which was all pretty much native grass at that stage, there hadn't been hardly any of it had ever been worked up. It was 750 acres. We were carrying 7.5 stock units on that property at the 31st of June in 1981. And I mean, that would be, you would nowhere near do that now. Yeah, I mean, even the colour of the country and the recovery from droughts, you could tell just wasn't the same as it was back then. I'm just basically coming to, as a friend really, and just to see what Ewan's doing firsthand. I've been over here a couple of times and had a look, but I haven't actually gone into any depth with him, and walked the farm. The reason I like it is because I the electrical side of the soil is to me is the most important thing, because everything's, as we know, it's electrical. And if you don't get your electrical side of your soil right, then nothing else is going to happen. That's to me, but I'm just a simple farmer, so just like everyone. But I like to think I'm reasonably perceptive.
Thanks for coming along, Hamish. I understand you are interested, but kind of not so sure that any of it's going to necessarily work. Can you tell me where you're at, or have I put words in your mouth that won't tear?
Oh, no, just general scepticism, I suppose, but also a general belief that what we're doing is not really working. And to be fair to everybody, seems to be selling a product.
Yep.
So it's who do you believe, who don't you believe? And obviously proof's in the pudding type stuff for me, And my wife's done a lot more research on Ewan and his system than I have, so I've sort of almost been dragged along type deal. But I'm still, we've got to do something different to what we have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have a look. Let's ask the questions. Not sure what questions I want to ask yet, because it was sort of, a lot of it will come from conversations with people and also seeing what's on the ground. We've had a massive weed problem. Like, we've literally just purchased a farm this year, which had a massive buttercup problem, and also hence found a massive Californian thistle problem as well. Because when we were looking at the farm, we knew we were buying a buttercup farm, but thistles weren't quite as prevalent in November when you're looking at the farm and buying the purchase type thing. So anyway, lots of chemicals going on this year. Very aware that has stunted quite a lot of growth in our farm, especially around the clovers and things like that, because it's actually written on the product. You're going to cook your clovers with this stuff, but But the reality is we had to do something. You couldn't walk across the paddock without putting your foot down on the stuff. And the cows don't eat it. So, and got through that sort of initial 6 months of the farming calendar, and then my wife started looking at this, and then I said, oh, yeah.
So we've been not quite as advanced as what Ewan's promoting, but we've been using mineral lime mixes for a while now.
Oh yeah.
But the guy, so just looking, and my wife found your YouTube videos. So we're here to visually see what he's doing today.
Right.
What you're talking about on your YouTube program makes sense to me, but I'm so involved in my business because of the size of it, I need somebody to do the technical side. So yeah, we have a performance program, and I'm trying to lift the productivity of the farm through natural processes. We do cultivation, so we have been using the antibiotic that he nuts off about. So we've ceased that because I was involved in the maize industry in a previous life, and learned a huge amount through their schools and whatnot. So this is just the learning through, if you like, learning through life. So yeah. So I'm a little bit excited. We've done the soil test. Yep, we've got a few minor issues, but the base is there. So yeah, so it'll be good to see.
Welcome everybody. It's been asked a few times how many times we have these open days, and I keep saying as little as possible because they're fairly hectic, and what starts is Paula and I go, oh, we should have an open day. Craig's got a couple of people who want to have a look, and then Leighton wants to have a couple of look, and then word gets out, and all of a sudden there's a whole heap of people from all over the countryside here, which is really cool. Today I want to talk about consumables and investment, because I think farming's really gone down a consumables process where you'll only ever get one bite from what you spend as a consumer, and whereas an investment you'll get multiple payback. And our soils have been turned off, so our term deposit account's flat, got no money in it. Well, it's actually full of money, but we can't access it, we can't use it, and we've got to try and get it out of there and into a system that we can utilise all the time. And hence, as a lot of you guys had the soil tests, you're looking at these total tests and against the available tests, and you're all bemused by the amount of numbers and what the hell it all means. And for my eye that's been looking at these for years, I'm just looking at farms that are absolutely loaded in the term deposit and they've got no keys. They don't know how to get in and open it up and actually get the value out of the farm. And so even with this property here, Dad purchased it 25 years ago, and it was owned by an Irishman, Murphy, and we sort of thought he was fairly tight regarding the fencing quality and things like that. But when we did the soil test, we had 7,000 kilos of phosphorus per hectare, which equates to about 70 tonne of P. And I thought, well, how the hell did that happen? Because he would never have bought it. And then I found out he was a local spreading contractor. So there's many ways to actually deal with, many ways to deal with how things turn up on the farm. But inadvertently, as you go down this track and you learn more and more, what we've been told to proliferate and keep sales going on certain products doesn't necessarily help our farms. And when you start to get further and further into the science, when you see people put product on and then it doesn't grow any more grass, or it grows for 2 months and then it stops, you've got to start wondering, what was the value in that? And certainly as the science and that's been evolving and we're understanding more and more a lot of these issues regarding aluminium and phosphorus and what happens, and the total, complete, utterly waste of money of putting more and more superphosphate on, especially when you've got equivalent to 70 to 150 tonnes of superphosphate sitting in your soil from the last 100 years of farming. It just seems a little bit stupid, all because somebody didn't do a different test than an Olsen P. I mean, Olsen P is a baking soda test designed from Mr. Olsen in the United States for soils over pH 7. And the only reason New Zealand Agriculture actually did it was that they could do it in half an hour instead of a day. So we've got a really stupid form of understanding how our soils are healthy, or not healthy, and how much money we've spent on them and we just didn't even know. So as we open up the knowledge base, then we've got to start changing our thinking, and I think that's the paradigm stuff that most of you guys are going through at the moment. What? He uses silica? What's that about? How's that work? So since Dad bought this, we haven't used 1 ounce of superphosphate or any form of phosphate. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't if I needed to, and particularly at the moment, you know, just dealing with the runway here, which was fully contoured, and watching the soil tests and watching what's going on, I might try a bit of a trial out there shortly. But it wouldn't be very large, but the rest of the farm, it's not required. So by doing the right tests, you can actually identify what's going on.
Can I ask the first question then, Ewan?
Yeah.
Typically, how many kgs of phosphorus would you use in a typical year of farming?
Oh, well, on your dry stock and sheep farming, about 3 kilograms, and dairy about 6 per hectare. So the mantra that you need 60 units on a dairy farm and 30 on a dry stock, I think they got a 0 missing in their equations. These so-called intelligent people. So we want to challenge people's thinkings about how this whole process works. I want lots of questions. Don't be shy. There's never a dumb question. I mean, on this journey, the only reason I've learnt what I've learned is I keep asking questions. And some of them seem completely daft. Then somebody comes up with an incredibly good answer going, wow, that's so simple. Why don't we go down that track now? And so what we want to see is you guys as farmers, and being one myself, is like you take notice of things that change on the farm and celebrate them. When things don't go right, ask more questions. Why didn't that go? Or what can we do better? And it's amazing how quick things will change for you. Of course, we've been at this for a while now, but we are learning how to speed this process up on all our clients' farms now. So, and it is getting busier and busier. So what I wanted to do is we'll just go out and we'll go down into the paddock just below the house here. It's an interesting place. I mean, Dad had a little knob down there he put lime on. I think not long after we got it, it was a barren sort of lump, nothing grew on it. And after the lime, nothing grew on it either. But if you look at it now, it's covered in cocksfoot, and we didn't put the seed there. So it's responded to what we've done in the soil fertility. And, you know, a lot of people go, oh, cocksfoot, it's a terrible grass. Well, if you let the cattle in there, it's mowed completely. And if you do a herbage test on, you find out that it's very, very nutritious. But the way that we utilise it has been quite poor. You know, cocksfoot bring up a lot of nitrates if the soil's not balanced, and then the animals don't want to eat it, and then you get clumps all over the paddock. And then everybody wants to spray it out or mow it or get rid of it some way or another. So we've got to celebrate some of these different species, see how they change through the season. We've just gone off from our really full red clover sort of summertime blend. You'll see in the paddock out here there's quite a bit of red clover still there, but it becomes pretty dominant. It's sort of like a lucerne crop over the summer. And it means that we can go on a really slow round if we want to. And the cattle right at the very front over there, they're actually on the last day of the paddocks that were cut for hay back in mid-December. And I don't know how many thousand kilograms of feed, but it's like the red clover, and that's right up to your knees, and they're cleaning it off right to the ground. So we don't have to be concerned about facial eczema, cost of making more silage, because the feed's going off. We've got good quality and we let the animals eat it, and we just use the fence to control them. And as Paula calls it, it's called lazyfarmer.com. So just to give you an idea, the red stuff here, that's our base soil material. It's garbage. It's good free draining stuff, but it used to start here. And it used to go just down like that, and then it's just red. And so that carbon, as it's growing, you can see there, and like those levels were around 2% carbon before, and they're up around 4.5 to 5. In the top part, they're at about 8% now. So what we've seen is that the production is relevant to the soil depth. If we get the soil to grow, we then grow more grass. But the big trick in learning all this stuff is that how many people have heard of this liquid carbon pathway that they talk about? Oh, that's good. You haven't been indoctrinated too badly. Well, it's a scenario is that there's, a plant photosynthesizes and it puts sugar or exudates down through into the soil. It doesn't put mineral back in there unless it goes through the animal and digests it and ships back on the paddock. So it's really giving an energy, and it's part of a cycle which is indicative of the nutrient return. So in simple ways, the sugar can be turned to acetic acids, vinegar, through aerobic digestion, and then they will harvest the nutrient that then go back up the plant through mycorrhizas. So there's a lovely little system going on. But the liquid carbon pathway does not grow carbon in the soil. I can tell you that now. It's a fallacy. What grows is the smallest microorganism on the planet, which is cyanobacteria. And how many people have heard me talking about that? We wouldn't be on this planet without them. That's how important they are. They were the originating biology that made this an aerobic environment so that we could breathe. So if you want to aerate your soils, if those cyanobacteria go through photosynthesis, they aerate your soil for you. Yeah. So all you got to do is set up an environment that they actually can go to work. Now, what we have to do is extrapolate this one tiny, tiny little single cell that it's the whole of the living systems on the planet. And so in that living system, there's 12 tissue salts. There's 12 salts that have a function in the cell. There's 64 minerals and subatomic particles inside the DNA of that cell. There's cofactors like copper, cobalt, nickel, iodine that are all part of that cellular function. And if we don't get it right for that individual cell, then we're not going to get it right for the rest of the farm. And as Paula calls me, I'm a cyanobacteria farmer, not an Angus farmer. They're a result. And our soils are a result of this too. And this is where we have to be really accurate when we're doing these soil tests, and after the first year, getting into herbage tests to look at what's shaken out, what you have got, what you haven't got, because the likes of selenium, iodine, nickel, cobalt, molybdenum are so small. You're looking at, like in a good quality pasture, you want cobalt at 0.4 of a part per million. So if there's 1 million people standing in here, in this paddock, 0.4 of them will be the cobalt. Do you think you could find it?
Where's Wally?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, where's Wally? So then that sits next to the selenium at 0.2, and the iodine at 0.1 to 0.2, and the nickel at 0.1. How do you think we can't actually measure that in the soil accurately? So we have to go then to a herbage test. But there's no point, you can do a herbage test to start with, but until your soils start to function, you don't actually really realise what's going to start coming up in it. And you're turning your soil into a living organism instead of a consumable. I'll throw some nitrogen, which is soluble, and the plant will just pick it up. We're turning it into a living system that it goes electrical. Now, who knows a little bit about electrical corrosion? Yeah, so that's where you corrode metals through electricity. And you see it in the ocean. When you go out in your boat, if you don't have a zinc block on the boat, which is what they call the sacrifice block, it corrodes the aluminium in the boat. And so in our soils, we need to utilise the electrical currents that run through the soil to actually move the minerals about. And it is actually a simple equation, because when you look at phosphorus, it's a negative charge. Right? And you can't move phosphorus through anything in a negative charge. You can't move through electrical charge. It's an impossibility. There's nothing to hook to it. But if you change it to potassium phosphate, ferrum phosphate, calcium phosphate, sodium phosphate, magnesium phosphate, all of a sudden you've got a salt that you can hook with the electrical charge. Now those are the salts that are required in each individual cell in the soil. So if you've got them working, the biology working, converting these salts and then laying down humus, then you're laying down nutrition ready to go through an electrical environment. And hence now we're not so reliant on that rain all the time. We've got a water-soluble nutrient, we've got a larger base to go from. And for those salts to work, then we've got to look at these cofactors. And have we covered all the minerals that are required in the DNA sequence? It's a far wider and deeper concept than what we have, put some P on. What's your Olsen P? But there's an actual good scientific evidence as to how these things function. Now, then we get into electromagnetic signaling. So there's electrical charge running through the soil, and it's sending a signal to the whole soil based on its nutrition. Okay, so when we get really healthy nutrition going on, it's signaling the plants, you can grow now. And it'll actually germinate the seeds. So like in here, there was no cocksford here 2 years ago. And the soil fertility's changed. Now look at all the cocksford. It's everywhere. This little lump here was a terrible lump, didn't grow anything. Now it's growing cocksford. What made those seeds all of a sudden to turn on? I never put them there. It was just, it's time to grow. Let's go. And so we don't understand that our soils are actually seriously like a computer. You know, in your computer, your information is stored within your silicon part of the soil and silicon chips, and it's run by electrical information. And it gives the computer the idea of what you need. I need this and I need that. So if you start to realize that the silica has the memory, it has electrical charge, it's talking, it's giving signals off, yeah, I've got plenty of carbon, I've got good nutrition, yep, turn that seed on. Now, so if you look next door, and we'll walk down there, you look next door and there's all these weeds. Well, their electrical charge has said, your soil's at this stage, and that's what you need to grow. Yeah, and so the year we had, 3 years ago now, we had 3.5 metres of rain from June to June. We made the biggest mess in some places. It was up to there, and it was black, could have planted potatoes. But come springtime, it all just grew grass again, and we didn't grow any willowweed. And yet every farm around us was covered in willowweed, which is a sign of saturated soils, and this is what can grow there. So the soil was in a good enough shape. No, you don't need to grow willowweed. In the past, it would have. And in some places where we've trampled the ground, there's a whole heap of docks turned up. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when next time the cattle go through there, they eat it to the ground. So we don't see dock as a bad thing. It's just a symptom of what actually happened. So it's not a case of we need more spray, going, yeah, we made a mess in the corner of that paddock. Yeah, we'll just let it sort itself out. And the cows all run in there and they eat it all off first. So it's actually just remedying the soil. It's a high nutrition plant given the right opportunity. But it'll only stay until the oxygen gets back in the soil and then it goes away again. So all of these things, like you see our really bad infestation of California thistles, well, that's just silicon. You know, we can see those tests in the herbage test. When we see the silicon get up in the herbage test to about 100 parts per million and the aluminium to 35, 40, 35 and below, that's when you don't have any California thistles. It's actually a predictable outcome as long as you follow the process.
Are those minerals in the herbage tests static? Because people say a herbage test is a snapshot in time, so to get a trend you need to take a test every month to see where it's going.
We like to do it in the springtime as it's in full growth, right, as a response to what we've done in the winter, because that's the time we're going to grow the most growth. Except when I've talked to you just before, like when you get to Canterbury and you've got a constant climate with a constant rainfall, or because of the irrigation, you can just keep building it. And yes, you could go back and look at those tests again. And it's certainly from the start of the season to the end of the season, if you're growing soil, there will be a difference. Right. And it can be significant. So these things, you know, horses for courses. You know, tests are cheap.
Yeah.
And knowledge from those tests, you know, are just unbelievable what good decisions you can make.
Do dung beetles play a role in this?
They're here.
Yeah, we saw the holes by the...
Yeah.
Did you introduce them?
No. No. The people that were selling them must have been really pissed off because they just rocked up. And they rocked up on another farm just down the road that we work on as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. But surely that's a case of you creating the environment for them to live and thrive in.
Absolutely. I mean, I first came across dung beetles up in Whangarei. And it was really interesting. Like, they had a paddock there that had been growing squash, and they hadn't, it was sort of 10 years since it'd been in squash, but dung beetles would not go in that paddock. All around it, they were everywhere. But the chemical residues and what had happened were not going there.
Because I was told that dung beetle populations don't migrate.
Well, they got wings, haven't they?
Well, I struggled, but the...
Well, it was interesting. I went for a walk up top of Krangahegi over there. It's probably 2,000 feet, and with my young fella about a month ago, and there was dead dung beetles on the top of it. I don't think anyone carried them up there and left them just for the shit and giggles. So.
Ewan, what's an efficient way of raising silicon levels in soils organically?
Follow our process. There's a real trick to it because the cyanobacteria have to be part of that equation. If they're not there, you've got to, in our soils, naturally, silicon should be in a hydroxide form, which then can be converted to silicic acid by the biology. The problem is that when you put superphosphate on it, it turns the hydroxides to oxides, which is just glass. Then you can't get at it. And so we're reintroducing that. Now, we've come up with a product called Silica Spark, which is a acetic acid-based product, which opens the silica up even further at the very starting point, so you can actually get a poof on the ground and help clean up some of the aluminium and get the process working. But I haven't seen anyone else do it, to tell you the truth. I haven't seen anyone even come close. And now we're getting the evidence of the testing protocols of what goes on. We know, we've got to have the boron right, we've got to get the aluminium out of the way, we've got to get the biology in place and get a few other things lined up for it to actually kick into gear and start to go. And then it starts showing you in the plant test. You can't test for it in the soil test. There's too many forms of silicon that come up in the test. And it's a real noticeable, if somebody gets dirt in their herbage test, they'll have a really high silicon content, they'll have a really high aluminium content and high iron, and go, oh, you got dirt in your test. And it's not accurate. But if you get just in the herbage, the only way that silicon can get in the plant is silicic acid. So then you know that you've got it sorted.
So potentially you can raise the levels with compost and like extracts?
No.
No?
Don't think so. I haven't seen anyone do it. I've just seen a process that took to get it to go. You need, as far as I'm concerned, is electricity, cyanobacteria functioning, the right mineralogy, and hydrated silica before you're going to get it to work. And that's nature. So all we're doing is putting nature back to what it created itself. And basically, if you go to places like Poverty Bay, which shouldn't have been Poverty Bay, but the flats there's a place called Ray's Bush, and I've seen a soil sample taken by another Brookside agent out of there where it never been cultivated. I've never seen a better soil sample in my life. It had 16,000 kilograms of available calcium. It had all the base saturations all imperfect. It had all the trace elements, and these cockatiel trees were so freaking high, and they're like this, and yet outside of it, where it had been agriculturally challenged, it had less than half the nutrient available. So that's how much we'd destroyed it. And so from those flats, like, it was marine, it had a high calcium level, it had volcanic activity coming from Taupo and out the back of Rotorua. So they had hydrated silicas, they had the marine environment, they had electricity, they had all the things that were required, and it built that soil. It did it by itself, without our influence. And so what we have to do is go, oh, nature was quite clever. perhaps we should just follow what nature did and deal with those issues and put it all back again. And so if you look at all of, if you look at society at large, in history, societies have gone to river deltas, trading, marine environment, healthy soils. And they usually collapse when their soils collapsed. The whole thing fell.
You were saying before that the cocksfoot wasn't here prior to and you hadn't sold it. So obviously your process, there was something there that it's replaced, correct or not correct?
Gaps, along with the red clover. As you see, the red clover is starting to drop away. And over the summer period, it was probably about 70 to 80%. And we had a bit of the plantain and the cocksfoot were just starting to show through. This last grazing, it cleaned it to the ground. Now the cocksfoot's come up. And the grasses tend to grow more at the cooler times of the year than the legumes. So we like to see that transition, that we go legumes, grasses, and we get intermittent lots and lots of plantains and other species, and then let it roll out the other end. You'll see parts of the farm, there's quite a bit of ryegrass coming up on this last round, and that's just a time of the year, last grazing with the clovers, that's what comes. It's just interesting, it would have been more ryegrass last year in this change. This year we've had more cocksfoot right here.
Yeah, you probably answered my second question, was what it looks like in the late winter and early spring. Being dairy farming, we're traditionally just a ryegrass, clover, sward of grass type stuff, you know, and here we're looking at a big fruit salad of all sorts of stuff, and how that sort of transitions from one to the other. Because, you know, like our property, we've just sprayed the living hell out of it to get rid of weeds, etc. So yeah, we've got quite a bit of the natural plantains and that sort of thing coming up, but zero clover, and the ryegrass is struggling, to be fair, and we're looking to do something going forward. But yeah, just interesting to see the transition from this to the next season.
And in that regard, like as a starting point to help get you through is starting with a brew and even looking at putting annual ryegrass in with it, or seeding with to get you the bulk of feed that you need. And the annual ryegrasses are really good for putting down more energy, like some sugars into the soil to allow everything to start working. So you're working in tandem with the change, and it's not that expensive. It's one of the quickest and cheapest cropping options you got. You know, annual ryegrass is quite cheap, undersower, and away you go. You can do a big chunk of your farm and get a heap of bulk of tucker, get you out the other end. And, you know, if you're having to use a little bit of fish and urea and molasses, you're still feeding those microbes and you're just kicking things on until a point where you're going, God, we got some feed. Oh, we don't have to do anything again.
So that is you know, if people are doing that in terms of trying to, you know, if you've got a poor quality pasture, you're putting your amendments on to try and lift the nutrition.
Yep.
But at the same time, adding some more, you know, preferred species of plants to lift that.
Yeah, generally it's the annuals that I'll go after at this time of the year if you're going to get through, you know, because it's cheap.
Yep.
And if it does set in your pasture, like you get to the point where you start to grow them and they're healthy and you can let them seed, you'll then start to get a bit more of them going on, and then it's just an ongoing process. They'll pop up. I think we'll have quite a bit pop up this autumn for us, but they won't really show themselves until midwinter.
Yeah.
This time last year was a classic example, wasn't it? We had one of the most brutal droughts we've probably had on our side, the King Country, Waikato. Guys went into the winter incredibly short, didn't grow a lot of feed. All of a sudden calving was on their doorstep. You know, what do we do, sort of thing. And, you know, a little bit of what Ewan's saying, the fish, molasses, just a tiny bit of liquid N, and it, you know, got them through a really tight pinch. Luckily, we've had some good growing conditions since then, but those farms have just exploded since. So it's just about being a little bit proactive. If we can see the hole coming, you know, let's get busy, let's do something about it.
Do you have any bloat challenge with your red clover?
No.
Because
the soils are balanced. Yeah. The interesting thing about most of the red clovers that you would have seen down there, they've all been cultivars and they've been planted as crops, and generally they've had a lot of potassium put in with them, and that's usually the recipe for bloat. Yeah. Up the potassium and put in a cultivar that's come from a seed company and you'll have trouble.
Sorry, if you're assuming that you're taking on a paddock that's been well sprayed and looked after or well managed historically, how long would it take for the fungi to get in there and clean it up before you would see? A month or 6 weeks. Right. Would you then have to delay any of the fish or urea application until they had done their job?
Best to try and get like at least a month with a bit of moisture on it before you come in behind.
Right.
Yeah, to let them set so they can grab it.
You're right. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is a bit of delay.
Yeah.
Time of the year is going to be a little bit crucial with it as well.
Yeah, well, there's no point going into a dry pasture and all that sort of thing if things haven't started to work. And I mean, I know, you know, you got to get over the humps and that sort of thing, but you still got to work with nature in that regard. Yeah.
Oh, just looking at the total timing of the package, how long have you been applying this program on this property? And secondly, have you changed your input program, or has that gone up, down, or what's, yeah?
2018 is when we really worked out that, yeah, we'd worked out the electrical side of the equation in the soil, but we certainly hadn't worked out the silicon cycle as far as the silicic acid and the hydrate. So from 2018 to here is what we've been looking at, more of the bigger package, and we get surprises. You know, like we cause ourselves surprises. 3 years ago, we used that silica spark for the first time, and we grew soil so quickly, the first thing that ran out was boron, and it crashed. And so you go, well, and luckily we had a few cock-ups where we tipped fert on the ground, and we actually ended up with like about 5 times the amount of stuff that, we were putting 1 kilo of boron in, and we got, 5 to 6 in that piece. Well, if you let the cattle into that area now, they just go over to that part and mow it absolutely clean. And so it's a bit of a learning process. Okay, we've got to go to this point here, and we go to this point here. And I guess the process that we're living our way through, Paul has been a great witness to it. Like, we've had mistakes where I came out of the fert bin and went down the track, and I had the spreader in third gear instead of first. And every time we let the cows in that part, there was just 100 cows on that line. They just mowed the whole lot. So it was a learning curve for us to understand, oh shit, what did we miss? In that regard, the first time I thought, it must be the silicon. So I put a trial on the runway of 12 tonnes of silicon per hectare. Didn't make any difference at all. So it wasn't until we actually worked our way through, went iodine, and then we then we kicked the boron in the arse, then we grew more grass. And this year it's been cobalt and selenium that we've been too far behind the game, because they're required in this whole process too. We started growing more soil. This part of the farm, we grew 10 tonne of carbon in the profile of 150 to 300 last year. So that was 36.7 tonnes of CO2 units, if you want to get it in the technical sense. It's rather a lot. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
So,
what you guys get now is to take the speed bumps out. Like, the thing, I was just talking to you before, like you're in the Hawke's Bay, the copper hasn't been attended to well as it should be. It's one of the major limiting factors, and I could go out there and go, look, just throw lots of silicon on and do this and this, and you'd get this boom, and then you'd hate me, because your animal health issues that come with building soil and not having trace elements to go for the animals, they're critical. And my sheet is shitty, and so when we're doing this now, it's in proportion to budget, soil type, nutrient availability, total nutrient, and seeing where you can go at a speed that you can go without those major hiccups.
Would it be fair to say, Ewan, there's a direct correlation between what's good for the animals, also really good for our soil biology, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the animals tell us so much. And we certainly, like, we haven't, I actually bought a pack of B12 to do the heifers at the front because it was going to be so long before they got to ground that I got to fertilise, because we actually isolated a problem and there was a growth. I could say I'm losing growth here and I'll do them. But watching the animals as they hit parts of the farm when we've done it, and the change in the animal from what we've done in the soil is quite phenomenal. It's quite eye-opening. And like, we're our worst critics really, because 2 years running we didn't have a vet bill. It was zero. No vaccinations, no drenches, no nothing. So we've broken it this year by spending $120 on B12. Before that, it was bull hurt his leg and need to carve a heifer with a vet. That's been our vet bill.
So, just talking about the value of grass, we hear a lot about ME, metabolising. How do you value the food value in your grass? What's the level? What's the
Now, look, you can see it in the herbage test. One of the things that you'll see when these herbage tests, this ME it's a bonkers equation because it takes in nitrogen. And you shouldn't have more than 2.8 to 3.2% nitrogen in your pasture, because none of the pastures can actually turn that into a protein. So if the animals eat that and it's too high in nitrogen, then they get the shits. And so this is what we see with just about all the animals. Even if you're not putting nitrogen on, you'll see these burn patches in the paddock, dark green patches everywhere. And what you see is that it deoxygenates the animal. I mean, when you get nitrate poisoning, it's a lack of oxygen. That's what kills them. So you're deoxygenating your animals as you go. So if you've got nitrate problems, you're out of balance. So then you can't actually utilise the feed correctly for your animal growth. So looking at these trace element checks, the mineral balance, and I can see when we do these tests whether we've got it under control or not. I can go into a dairy farm and their nitrogen would be 4.2 and go, nah, what are we missing? We haven't got it under control. But as soon as we get it under control, comes back down to 3. And then you see it in the animal health and the reproductive and the conception rates. So there's a corresponding between pasture species, them grazing, herbage tests, inputs, and your back pocket at the end of the day.
So on a production basis, I mean, we have dairy farmers that measure kilos of milks per hectare. What do you think your carcass weight per hectare is? Where does it come from and where do you think it is now?
Good question. I wouldn't be able to actually tell you that. You know, like our seasonal outputs have been improving more and more, to so much to the point that we had too many calves and we're actually grazing some down the road on a client's place so that we can keep up with the production of what we spit out the other end. Generally, we're sort of around 300 kilo carcass weight on average through the heifers and the steers. And that goes up and down with different years as we learn, but it's like this. At the present stage, we've got 300 cattle on 77 hectares.
Yep.
Does that give you a bit of an idea of the sort of like...
How many of those are your breeding cows?
95.
Righto.
Yeah.
And that's what you would winter, 300?
No, we'll get down to 260. And we'll keep killing too. Like we're knocking out cattle all the time. We want to be diminishing as we go.
So your wintering stocking rate, what would that be, like kilos per hectare, just a bit of a guide?
Well,
kilos per hectare, or?
Well, say we 240 cattle at an average weight of 400 and something kilos on 80 hectares. Well, I mean, that would be the easiest way to work it out. Say 240 cattle on 80 hectares, that's 3 to there at an average weight of 400 kilos. So there, yeah, you're looking at 1,200. Yeah. So that's a quick and...
Grass only?
The hay will come out when we need it. As I say, like if we don't need it, we don't use it. A few years back we sold the whole lot and made a hell of a nice little payout for the... at the moment, I don't think we use bugger all. There's more in the shed than we've had for a long time. Just see what happens. It's nice to have it there, whether we use it or not. That's a different story. Again, it's laziness. The one thing about laziness, you've got to know how to carry it out really well. Well, and I mean, you said, you know, you're reading stuff and you're devouring information more at the moment. And like when I first started getting into Acres USA and trying to work out what was going on, I was devouring books from them to try and get a picture of what was going on. And I was asking all these questions, like, how does this work and how does that work and what's doing this? And I ended up talking to engineers, metallurgists, chemists, like all sorts of things to try and get a picture of how this whole picture worked. And I think the thing that I said to you before, when you're trying to look at a whole a picture, but you don't know what it should be in the middle, you don't know what that is. And I'd say now, for me, it was a total soil test and knowing about the electricity in the soil. And then I go, that drives that. So then you hook the biology and you hook this and you start to build a picture going out like a flower as all the parts join in, but no energy and no nutrient, no production. So that's where I sort of put, and once you get a picture and that something to work off, like a sprocket in the middle of your wheel, now we got motion.
So from an agrarian point of view, I wander around my farm and I dig a hole and I find some earthworms. What am I really seeing there?
They're there to eat whatever's needs to be digested. So at the moment you won't find many earthworms because it's just that time of the year. For us, earthworms turn up when we have an cyanobacteria explosion. So come in the middle of winter, they go bonkers. And like this is when we get earth castings about this right across the whole farm. And it's mind-boggling. I think the winter field day, you know, the guys that were here were commenting, God, it's like being on carpet. It's so soft and squeezing. And you open the soil up and have a look, or you only open the top up, and you just see this mountain of earthworm castings on it. And it's just, worms have gone down, they've had a cyanobacteria explosion, they've gobbled them all up, they brought them up to the surface, and all the root hairs of all the plants all start going all over the top of it. You think you've made the biggest mess in the paddock you ever...
The day after grazing, it doesn't look good.
No.
Like 3 or 4 days later, it's like green, just like, whoop.
So these are the changes. Worms are great things, but you've got to understand, like, worms don't predict outcomes. Like, they are an outcome.
So the cyanobacteria, do you have to introduce it, or is it already in the soil that needs to be stimulated?
Well, we use ocean products to do it. We use the gypsum from Blenheim. You can use seawater. They need to be well supported. Yeah.
But right now they're probably not on the farm.
Here?
No.
Oh yeah, no, probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, spray, aluminium toxicity are the two things they hate. They just die. Yeah. They love electricity. That's one of the key points with all of us, is that if you go to the pole in the springtime, it's all sea ice. It's frozen solid. As soon as that melts, there's an explosion of life, and it's the cyanobacteria that's exploding. They're not temperature reliant. They're energy reliant. There's a massive electrical current up there, high magnetic field, high electrical current, and they explode. And that's what we see, you know, why when you get closer to the poles, they have a much shorter growing season, but it's huge. You know, they plant later and harvest earlier. And so that's just a reliant, you can measure the magnetic fields, like here, we're lucky to get to 0.4 of a Gauss for the magnetic field. You get to Invercargill, it's 0.6. And the corresponding electrical charge in the soil is different. If we can get to 0.25, we're going great. I can get to 0.6 down there, and when I was being in Wales, I've got up to 1.5. So you can see the gradient lifts as you get closer to the poles. And that's that, boom, growth, gone. So, I mean, has anybody asked the question, like, we all need to get 17 degrees before we grow grass, except if you're in Invercargill. Well, it's true. I mean, I've been standing in a paddock in Invercargill and it's 6 degrees and it's growing as fast as it does in the Waikato. And I've seen it in Wales. You know, I've been at 9 degrees and it grew faster than anything I'd seen in the Waikato. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, what the hell's going on? It doesn't equate. But the electrical stuff equates properly now.
Can I ask a question about aluminium?
How many would you like to know?
Oh.
It's one of my favourite subjects.
All right. I mean, you might have covered some of this, but our tests show really high aluminium. All the literature that's out there currently, and the thinking is that pH/lime forces aluminium lower, therefore the roots get further down, away from the aluminium. Boom, happy days growing grass. But obviously you've probably got a different train of thought on that. Is some of that correct or none of it correct?
No, some of it's quite correct. If you throw enough lime on and you bump the pH, you'll actually turn the free aluminium into hydroxide. So then that's the aluminium 3 plus with hydroxide around the outside. Becomes part of the soil structure, it's not a problem, okay? But if you've got soluble aluminium and low calcium in the availables, and yet you got lots of calcium in the totals, then you got a silicon problem. It's not, you can't, as I said, you can't identify that silicon problem through soil testing for the actual product, but you can identify it when there's no calcium, too much soluble aluminium, and lots of calcium in the background that's sitting there not available. And so what we've seen, and you know, even Steiner, bloody 100 and something years ago, if you want calcium availability, you needed silicon and boron, and we've seen that in spades, absolutely. Boron's not that expensive. If the calcium's sitting there, just turn it on. When we put the silicon on with what we've done with that silicon spark, we've got lots of soluble silicon to start with. First way to get rid of aluminium is bond it with silicon, and it just turns it to silica, a soil particulate. It's non-toxic then. It becomes part of the soil. So it's a quicker way to get around that problem. Although I'm not saying don't put lime on, but if your soil test is showing that you've got a heap of it there in the totals, well, you're only spending money that you've already got. You understand what's there and then move on. Yeah, and we you know, like some of you, our Australian friends, I just go and put some lime on, will you? It's that low. I think you've got shitloads of soluble aluminium, haven't you? But he's got no background calcium. So just go and put some lime on to start with. I can't do anything with that, or I can do a little bit, but like I'd be wasting money. Not that it'd be too bad taking it off Australia's, but
just with the silicon, Ewan, is there what's the difference between volcanic silicon and like silicon sand, as in I'm surrounded by silica sand? And
on the beach, it's an oxide.
Yep.
Okay, and it's unavailable. The volcanics, each volcano is differently, but the one that you're looking for is a particular aluminosilicate hydroxide that comes in a certain band, and generally if there's a clay part it's always white, and the sands, they have a particular volcanic trace. And the interesting thing is that they both are sort of got great properties. Like if you go to the beach, you know, on a nice sandy beach, you need these, on a sunny day. And if you notice how hot it is to the old feet, why is something white that's hot? It's actually going through that process where the sun's converting photons from the sun to electricity, which puts off heat, light and electricity, and the electricity takes the shells back into the ocean. So a sandy beach never has a lot of shells on it, and your feet get really hot and you need those sunglasses. So that's that photovoltaic reaction that we actually cause in the soil with that form of silica, except super fine. And then the other form is that we're giving soluble silica to the plant. Yeah.
As we know of, how many different forms of silica are there?
Well, we know of 125, if that's not confusing enough. Yeah. And don't ask me to rendition on which one's. Yeah. So, any more questions on that?
What would be your fastest round you ever go on?
40 days.
And I'm quite a very high input farmer. Will any of the inputs coming into the farm affect what's going on in the soil?
To a point, but if you can get your soil as best you possibly can, the idea is to get it to a process so that as it goes through the cows, it'll have the biology to start breaking it down, and hopefully you start making lots more money and slow the inputs of what you need to up your dollar rate per hour.
So you mean inputs as an imported feed?
Yes.
Yeah. The video that we did with Ross Barker and his son-in-law down in the at Reparoa, like they're still feeding 6 kilos a day inputs. They're doing 2 kilograms of milk solids a day at the moment. But in that regards, they're really starting to wonder about the input. You know, is it worth it? Are we getting production out of the cost of it? They're 16% ahead. They've dropped their summer crops and their winter crops. They're growing more silage themselves, so their cost structure is starting to change. So now the paradigm's starting to go with it. And I sort of put it to most of the guys as like, that's a really good question you put forward. It's like, if you're observant enough in your own farming perspective and start to see things change and you've got really good information, you go, perhaps I'll stop that and I won't do that crop because that keeps it in the rotation, because all the paddocks are growing quite well at the moment. So then, my grass has gone up and how many kilograms I'm eating, I don't need as much as that. That palm kernel's got expensive. Urea's got completely out of hand. You know, like you can start dropping things off according to what you're seeing yourself.
Do you know anything about NDF in grass?
A little, but I tend to look at more the fat content, the natural fat content, and the protein content, or like to get the nitrogen down into that 3s and getting that fats up to 3.5 to 5%, because you're getting free energy at that stage. And these are fats that get converted to omega-3s and that. They're really high grade fats. So they go from a thing called linoleic acid and then get converted through the process into omega-3s. The fibre and all that sort of thing, yeah, the nitrates have more of an impact than anything I see.
So on a System 2 dairy farm doing, 500 solids a cow, what are you doing as far as pasture renovation, regrassing, once the farm's been in your system for a while? What does that look like?
Probably me sitting out off Great Barrier with a fishing rod. That's it. Yeah, like I think this whole regracing thing and everything's, it's just it's a myth. It's a fallacy. I haven't seen any of these high performance grasses stay in the pasture whatsoever. I've had, on the paddock next to the runway, just over on the side there, we had a run of trees there. We cut them down, we burnt them all, and I regrassed it, and I got a really high performance multi-species mix and everything like that, and this is going to be good. And, I put it in, it lasted 18 months. And yeah, it took off the first season, looked fantastic, and then the rest of our stuff, the normal pasture just took it back over and it all just disappeared. There's virtually undetectable that there was any changes. So what was the point?
So you didn't see any change in the soil structure or anything from that multi-species crop?
No, not at all. We see more changes. This is the biggest cover crop, the best cover crop you'll ever have is cyanobacteria, and you can't even see them. Crazy, isn't it?
What would you have done there to put some grass back in?
I just got the local contractor because there was about 2 hectares.
I mean, like, would you just put an annual in now, what you know? Or?
Yeah, probably. I just throw a little bit of grass, whatever, mix old style grasses together and a little bit of chicory or whatever and an annual, and just fire it in and let it come back, sort itself out.
Just some cover for the time being, yeah.
There's a lot to be said for the old bush food.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I think what we're expressing now is what was probably in the seed bag that turned up on the boat, just after the Endeavour. And there's a lot of money being made, and it's amazing how that paradigm of our animal health, our cropping, our regrassing has all been fixed around a paradigm of a thing called an Olsen P. The lady sitting in the back go, oh yeah. Yeah, it's bonkers, isn't it? I mean, that,
these new grasses, though, are developed in the perfect environment.
yeah, the imperfect environment to see you some more fertiliser. Yeah.
Yeah, but then when you put them in a harsh farming environment, you know, and normal climatical conditions, I've seen it from Taranaki to Northland, they just don't last. I'm a real critic of a lot of the new grasses, and I mean, I'd like to think I'm a reasonable dairy farmer that's been doing it for 30 years, and I've planted a hell of a lot of grass seed over the years, and I'm now reverting back to the very grasses that I was using 20 years ago, and the new stuff's just not hanging around. Like, I mean, tend to agree with Ewan, yeah, but you've got to put something in to start with to get a cover, so yeah.
Yep, it's about managing your way out of where we are. And and it's a funny sort of thing. As a, you know, like if you're farming and you're busy and you're used to putting nitrogen on and regrassing and all that sort of thing, you've actually got to keep yourself busy for the first 12 months in the transition, just so that you don't get withdrawal systems. You'll get the shakes. What? I've got time to go fishing? It's really hard. It is hard. If you've been busy all the time to actually start to withdraw the needle out. And it's like, and that's why I'm so like going, look, if you're not too happy about it, get some fish and some molasses, and that'll keep you busy. You know, there's a good busy and a bad busy. Down cows is a bad busy. A good busy is putting a bit of fish and molasses on, growing a bit more grass, you know, seeing out in front of you what you're doing. A good busy is walking around your farm and having a look at it. You know, my grandfather used to say the best fertiliser is the farmer's footsteps. You know, yeah. Don't get a halter system.
Can I just add to what he was saying?
Why not?
Why not?
Have you seen the EMF problems that come from it? Have you put a cell phone to your ear and taped it on there for 24 hours a day? No, well, have a go. Go to bed with a halter collar on. See how you feel. Yeah. Like, the thing I see about halter, it's a means to make you less busy so you can spend more money elsewhere. It's a consumable. Next year, there's nothing from it. There is absolutely nothing. And like, if you get to the stage where the farm is just creaming it, it's kind of nice to go down the farm and let the cows out of the paddock, go to the cow shed, and you go and move the fence, and you know, and you've got an old dog that wanders along behind the cows. You get to the cows and milk the cows, or the kids are doing it or something. Everything's relaxed. Dabs. Yeah, you didn't need the drone to go back around the farm to see where the bullcock fell off. And like, it's all these things that we've got ourselves so busy so that we can spend more money. And it's why? Why? I see, like, Floppy, I played rugby with him next door. He's 10 years younger than me. He looks 10 years older. He's running the whole time. You know, like he's chasing his tail. And that's what we've all got ourselves into, because we think that this is the way that you make more money. You don't. Because what happens, and this is the great thing about having a YouTube channel, is that when you pick up a Farmers Weekly magazine, it's an advertising program for what they want you to buy. It's not about good farming whatsoever. They don't have, this guy's reduced all his costs so that all our advertisers are going to go broke. I don't think they're going to put that in the magazine. So, you know, where we get our information from is really about changing our attitude and how we go about that. And I must admit, you know, like, we seem to be on social media quite a bit, but halter seems to be a hell of a lot in there as well. And I just go, don't do it. There's a shit ton of money. And I'll show you, we'll walk down the bottom of the runway now, and I'll show you the effect of this issue with the electrical current coming through our soil, having clean soils, the effect on pasture, the effect on yourself, and realise how much damage gets done to has been done to our farms, and we never knew.
Just a question. I look at the leaf here, pests and diseases. In the bay we have things called grass grub, piranha, crickets, stem weevil. Just a comment on your program.
Well, there was a really good friend who's passed away, Tom Harris, actually brought some good fungal species in for piranha and grass grub. That, you know, once they're part of the soil biome, these guys, they just bugger off. It kills them. What I found when we first started mucking around with them and going, It doesn't only kill the bugs, it actually helps fix our soil. So what we've seen is that when these multiplicity of fungal species that we're using now, they clean up so much of that stuff. So, okay, the piranha and the grass grub, it's a no-brainer, it's gone. You know, like if you've got drench resistance in your animals, you've got nutritional problems. It's not drench resistance, it's just like, well, you might be short of copper or cobalt or whatever, like there's a nutritional problem that's causing the issue. Healthy animals don't get worms.
How long since stock have been in this?
About 27 days.
Let's talk about weeds a minute.
Where are they?
Well, you've got an old mate next door that.
Oh yeah.
10 years older than you by looks. If you jumped the fence with the tractor, you know, what sort of reaction time would you see, you know, with all your kellies and that? Would we be talking 50% less in the first 12 months, or are we on a longer program?
The biggest issue that we've got in all of that stuff is just the attitude. If you're ready to go, yes, I'd say that. But you know, like as far as us getting clients, you know, what you said about driving up, Mike, about driving up driveways, we won't drive up anyone's driveway, not unless we've been invited. The issue is that people need to start to educate themselves to a point where, man, there's something to this, and I'm going to look a bit deeper and start to clean out the brains about what we need to farm. And it's only at that point that you actually can really move forward. You can't go onto a conventionally farmed chemical process and change it like that without the whole attitude changing and everything. But when you get that change, yeah, it comes fast, especially if they follow all the rules. And this is where I'll take you down about the rocks, because like people come back, oh, it's still got thistles, and go, oh yeah, did you get the rocks out? They're in the shed. And going, don't blame me. I gave you the new car and I gave you the model to fix it up, and you didn't do it. You know, like you can't drive down the road in your brand new Range Rover without wheels on it. So, you know, it's a educational process that you want to be part of it. And that can be a challenge. And I think the rocks part of the EMF is probably a big challenging part. And that's why we'll go down there and challenge your thinking some more now. Now, you had a question here.
Yep. We've got some brown top country that's 137 years since it was established. So I think this hasn't got any rhizobia in the clovers, because the rhizobia didn't come in until 1950s, because all the seed coming from Europe came in the dry form, and the bacteria that creates nitrogen would have died in the process. So, and you look into the pastures, and it is a bit like spot the clover. So, how would you get around that one?
I'd say, first of all, we've got to look at this soil test and what limiting factors brown top. This was a brown top farm. 26 years ago, this was a brown top farm. And I reckon that they grassed it probably about 120 odd years ago as well, from the time from them doing the. And what I've seen is that we've relied a lot on our thinking about one particular process, like the rhizobia that grows in the clover, okay? And where that's one nitrogen fixing bacterium that needs the clover to live in, where we're finding the cyanobacteria can actually set that nitrogen better than the rhizobium. You can actually set it without the clover to start with, and it will start producing the nitrogen. So what you've got to look at, for every 1% humus that you increase in the soil, you get 1 tonne of nitrogen with it. So it's not necessarily the rhizobium you need the biological process to be kicking into gear. I think generally what we've seen is that those rhizomes are there. They've been, in one way, shape or form, they're looking for nutrition before they actually show up. And so you go through a process of looking at the clover nodules, and all of a sudden one day they turn pink. And you know that they've turned up, they've arrived because of the nutrition. And you can get rid of them too. Don't put any cobalt on and they won't turn up. So these are things that we see. Yeah, lovely things, but consumables, not investments. Any more questions? Everyone wants to go to sleep on the grass. Hey, it gets really comfortable. I know that. I go to people's farms for the first time and I don't like going there. I'm pretty sensitive to the EMF myself. And as Paula will say, Ewan's gone blue and red and horrible and he's sweating and he wants the hell out of here quickly. We go away, and if we go back the following year and they've got the rocks in and they've got their soil sorted out, we'll sit down in the paddock. I just can't handle the shit.
Flies too.
What's that?
There's way less flies. If I was sitting in our paddock, I'd be covered in flies.
It's probably a good conversation to have, isn't it?
Yes, that nitrate issue and the flies. Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like in sheep, it really shows up because the flies think the sheep's dying. Because what happened is decomposition, there's nitrates. So the sheep's emitting nitrates, so the flies move in. Dairy cows are the same, they're sitting on them, pecking away at them. It's decomposing flesh to them. We put our animals under so much stress, and when you look at the herbage tests that come back from the companies and they go low, medium and high, everyone gets their test and go, oh, well, my nitrogen's in the medium range at 4.5. I don't want it down there in 3. That's too low. The herbage tests have all been just calculated on the mean average of all the tests that have gone through there. It doesn't actually mean what it should mean. It's like for animal nutrition, 2.8 to 3.2 should be the absolute bang-on model. Anything after that, the plant can't handle, it's going to have some nitrates, and then it causes problems, stress. And hence, sheep are shockers for it. Fly strike's a wonderful thing, isn't it, Craig? Especially when you're shearing. Yeah, it's a horrible thing.
If you're going to put some liquid in on with your molasses and your fish, does it matter what form the liquid in is, whether it's UAN or dissolved urea or dissolved SOA, or does it?
Best dissolved urea. Okay. Yeah. We do use, like if you are cultivating, about the only time I'll go sulphate of ammonia, about 50 kilograms per hectare when you're tipping it over, just because there's some sulphur there for aid in the digestion of the trash and speed up the fallowing. Otherwise, don't touch it. It causes problems. There's only certain times you can use that sort of stuff. We've seen one farm, they put some sulphate of ammonia on, and everywhere that they put sulphate of ammonia on, grass grub turned up. Killed the farm. They were in transition and it just, we just wanted a bit more grass. And that's why I'm really blunt now with people. I'll just do this. Okay, yeah, you go and do that. You go and do that. Don't involve me in your stuff because I know what'll happen. And I don't want to be held accountable for somebody else's, I only put a little bit on. It's like a little bit of Roundup or a little bit. I don't want to know.
People here that are actually on your journey now, for want of a better word, or are we all just here trying to find out whether we should be taking this trip down this lane or not? Just out of interest.
Most of them are fishing at the moment.
I've been the ultimate skeptic.
No, look, we didn't open the gate. This is the thing, is like we wanted the skeptic new people to come today. Yep. We have other days when we open up for other people to come. I think our winter one, we had quite a few more older clients and that sort of thing, but we didn't invite them. We would have ended up with 150 people here, and you wouldn't got to ask all the questions. You would have got a lot more really cool stuff, what you hear on our YouTube channel from a lot of the farmers that we're interviewing about how their lives have changed and how much easier life's got. And they're not hard to get back here. You could have rustled up 10 or a dozen without a problem, Yeah.
I do stuff with you, and I'm a kiwifruit grower, so I'm not pasture stuff. I've got a little bit of animals growing, and I've got one paddock at the front of my place where some cows are, and it's had thistles on it for the last 2 years. Going back in the last 2 months, they're not there now. But my kiwifruit is, haven't used nitrogen or phosphorus with potassium for the last 2 or 3 years, organic. And I'll be sitting in the top end of the production this year.
What we're doing here is just an expression of how I like to farm. It's cool. It's for me. You don't have to do it this way, but we can actually take you down this track and make your pockets a lot fuller with money and time and a bit more healthy environment a lot more healthy environment, really good food. And generally, I think if we don't go this way and look at nature and take advantage of what we know about it, we're fooling ourselves. We can't beat it. Nature will beat us into the ground no matter what you do. In the end, it'll have you.
Keen to dive deeper? Check out our audiobook and Eco Farmer's Discovery on Spotify, or grab our free ebook, The 6 Things You Need to Improve Soil and Farm Profit. Links in the description.